Nothing was wrong with my life. That was the problem. Every day looked fine. And every day I was slowly disappearing. As one ordinary morning, I stopped running. Today started like many other days in my life. No special plans, no big dreams for this morning. I woke up before my alarm, not because I was excited, but because my mind was already tired. The room was quiet, but my thoughts were loud. I stayed in bed for a few minutes and stared at the ceiling, asking myself the same question I ask every day. What am I doing with my life? I stood up slowly, washed my face with cold water, and looked at myself in the mirror. My face looked normal, but my eyes told another story. They looked tired, older than my age. I smiled a little, just to check if I still could. The smile was weak, but it was there. Outside, the day was grey, not rainy, not sunny, just grey, the kind of weather that feels honest, like it is not trying to impress anyone. I liked that. I put on my jacket and left the house. As I walked, I watched people around me. Everyone looked busy. Some were talking on the phone. Some were laughing. Some looked angry. I wondered if anyone else felt the same way I did. I went to the small cafe near my street. I don't go there every day, but today my feet took me there without asking my brain. I ordered a simple tea and sat near the window. The glass was a little dirty, but I could still see the street. Cars passed, people crossed the road, life continued. I took my phone out of my pocket and opened social media. Bad idea. I saw people traveling, smiling, buying things, living perfect lives. I knew it was not real, but still, it hurt. I closed the app and put the phone back. I told myself, enough for today. That's when I noticed an old man sitting alone at the table next to me. He was drinking coffee slowly, like he had all the time in the world. His clothes were clean but old. His hands were shaking a little. He looked calm, not sad, not happy, just calm. At some point, he looked at me and smiled, a real smile, not a forced one. Long morning, he asked. Yes, I answered. It feels longer than usual. He nodded. Some days are like that. They carry more weight. I didn't know why, but I kept talking. Maybe because he listened, really listened. I told him about feeling stuck, about waking up tired, about feeling like life was passing and I was standing still. I didn't tell him everything, but enough. He didn't interrupt me. When I finished, he took a sip of his coffee and said, "Do you know what I learned too late?" I shook my head. That waiting for the perfect day is the fastest way to lose your life. His words stayed in the air between us. But what if you don't know what to do? I asked. What if you try and fail? He smiled again. Failing is not the problem. Not trying is. We sat in silence for a moment. I felt something strange inside me, not happiness, not hope, something small but strong, like a door opening just a little. Before leaving, he stood up, put some money on the table, and said, "Today is not special because something big will happen. It's special because you are here, awake and breathing. Do something small with it." Then he left. I stayed there for a few minutes, thinking. The tea was cold now, but I drank it anyway. I didn't suddenly know my purpose. I didn't suddenly become confident, but I felt different, lighter. When I walked out of the CAF, the sky was still grey. Nothing outside had changed. But inside me, something had moved. I didn't know where this day would take me. I didn't know if tomorrow would be better. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't want the day to end quickly. I decided to walk instead of taking the bus, step by step. No rush, just today, just this moment. And without knowing it, that small decision became the start of something I had been waiting for a long time. I kept walking without a clear direction. No music in my ears, no phone in my hand, just the sound of my steps and the city breathing around me. I noticed small things I usually ignored. A child pulling his mother's hand, a man fixing his bike, a woman opening her shop and smiling at a customer. Life was happening quietly, without asking for permission. For a moment, I felt like an outsider watching the world. Then I realized something simple but important. I was part of it too, even if my life felt messy, even if I didn't have answers. I sat on a bench in a small park. The trees were bare, but strong. They didn't look sad, they looked patient. I thought about the old man's words again. Do something small with today. I asked myself what that could be. I didn't need a big plan. I didn't need to change my whole life. Just one small thing. I took my phone out and opened my notes. I wrote one sentence. Today, I will not run away from my life. It felt strange, but honest. Later that day, I went home. The room was the same as always, same walls, same silence. Usually, this silence felt heavy. Today, it felt different. It felt like space. Space to think. Space to breathe. I made a simple meal and ate slowly. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll on my phone. I just sat there. I thought about the past, about all the times I waited for permission, waited for confidence, waited for life to start. And slowly, I understood something painful. Life had already started. I was just not fully there. In the afternoon, I opened my laptop. Not to watch videos, not to escape. I opened a blank page. I didn't know what to write, so I wrote the truth. I am afraid, I typed. The words looked small on the screen, but they carried a lot. I am afraid of failing. I am afraid of trying. I am afraid of staying the same. I kept writing. The sentences were not perfect. The grammar was not perfect, but they were real. I wrote about feeling behind, about comparing myself to others, about feeling invisible. And with every sentence, I felt a little lighter. When evening came, the sky turned orange and then dark blue. I stood near the window and watched the lights turn on in other houses. I wondered what stories were happening behind those walls. Some people were probably happy. Some were sad. Some were lost, just like me. And somehow, that made me feel less alone. My phone buzzed. A message from someone I hadn't talked to in a long time. Hey, how are you? A simple question, but today I didn't answer with I'm fine. I wrote, I'm trying to be honest with myself. There was a pause. Then, a reply. That's not easy. Respect. I smiled. A real smile this time. Before sleeping, I sat on the bed and thought about the day. Nothing big had happened. No miracle. No sudden success, but something had changed. I didn't feel like a passenger anymore. I felt like someone holding the wheel, even if I didn't know the road yet. I remembered the old man again. I wondered where he was now, maybe sitting in another CAF, maybe talking to another tired soul, or maybe he was just a part of this day, meant to appear and disappear. As I turned off the light, one thought stayed with me. I don't need to fix my whole life. I just need to show up for it. Tomorrow might be hard. I might wake up tired again. Doubts will come back. Fear will knock on the door. But now I know something I didn't know before. Even on an ordinary day, even in a grey city, even with an uncertain future, I can choose one small action. And sometimes that is enough to keep going. I close my eyes, not waiting for a better life, but ready to live the one I already have. The next morning did not feel magical. I woke up tired again. My body felt heavy and full. A few seconds, I almost forgot everything from yesterday. The same ceiling, the same room, the same silence. I closed my eyes and thought, so nothing really changed. But then I remembered the sentence I wrote. Today, I will not run away from my life. I sat up slowly. Fear was still there. Doubt too. They didn't disappear overnight. But something new was there as well. Awareness. I knew how I felt, and I didn't push it away. I washed my face and looked in the mirror again. Same face, same eyes, but this time I didn't look away quickly. I stayed for a moment. You're still here, I said, quietly. It wasn't a strong sentence, but it was true. Outside, the air was cold. I walked to the same street as yesterday, but it felt different. Not because the city changed, but because I was paying attention. I noticed how the morning light touched the buildings, how people moved fast, chasing their own days, everyone carrying something unseen. I thought about my future. It still looked unclear. No clear job, no clear place, no clear answers. That scared me, but I also realized something else. The future had always been unclear. I just noticed it now. At noon, I did something small, but important. I sent an email I had been avoiding for weeks. It wasn't perfect. I rewrote it 3 times. My hands shook a little when I pressed send. But when it was done, I felt proud, not because of the result, but because I didn't avoid it. Later, I helped someone with a simple task. Nothing big, just listening, just being present. And for a moment, I forgot about myself. That moment felt peaceful. In the afternoon, doubt came back strong. A voice in my head said, "This won't last. Tomorrow, you'll be the same again." Maybe the voice was right, maybe not. But for the first time, I didn't argue with it. I just said maybe. But today I'm here. I walked again in the evening, just like the day before. Same streets, same park. I sat on the same bench. The trees were still there, but I noticed small buds on one branch, almost invisible, waiting. I smiled, not because life was easy, but because growth doesn't ask for permission. It happens quietly. I thought about all the years I spent waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel confident, waiting to feel enough, and I understood something simple and painful. Feeling ready is not the start, action is. As the sky got darker, I felt calm, not excited, not hopeful in a loud way, calm in a quiet way. Like I finally accepted where I was, without hating myself for it. At night, back in my room, I opened my notebook again. I wrote another sentence. I don't need a new life. I need a new relationship with the life I have. I read it twice. It felt right. Before sleeping, I thought about the old man one last time. Maybe he was never meant to stay in my life. Maybe he was just a mirror, someone to remind me of what I already knew but had forgotten. I turned off the light. Tomorrow would come with its problems and questions. Some days I would move forward, some days I would fall back. But now I knew something important. I was no longer waiting for days to end. I was living inside them. Life did not suddenly become kind. Problems didn't disappear. Money was still tight. The future was still unclear. Some mornings I woke up, tired again, with fear sitting on my chest like a weight. But now, when fear came, I didn't panic. I knew it. I recognized it. It was no longer a stranger. One evening, after a long day, I sat alone and thought about the past year, about all the versions of myself that tried and failed, that hoped and got disappointed. I realized something simple. I didn't hate those versions anymore. They were not weak. They were just trying to survive. That night, I went for a walk. Without a reason, no plan, no destination. The city lights were soft. The streets were not loud. I felt like the world was finally breathing at my speed. I passed the CAF again, the same one where I met the old man. I stopped for a moment and looked inside. Different people, different faces. He wasn't there. I smiled quietly. I didn't feel sad. I felt grateful. Inside that CAF, nothing magical happened. No miracle, no promise, just a conversation. Just honesty. And somehow, that was enough to change the direction of my thoughts. I kept walking and asked myself a question I had avoided for years. I kept walking and asked myself a question I had avoided for years. If no one is coming to save me, what can I do for myself? I understood that my life was not broken. It was unfinished. Some days later, I failed again. I made mistakes. I doubted myself. I felt behind. For a moment, I thought, see, nothing really changed. But then I noticed something new. I didn't stay down as long as before. I didn't attack myself with cruel words. I stood up faster. Progress was not loud. It was quiet, almost invisible, like learning to breathe differently. One morning, while drinking tea, I realized something that made me stop. I was no longer asking, why is my life like this? I was asking, what can I do with what I have? That change felt bigger than success. I started to respect small wins, sending a message, finishing a task, saying no when I needed to, resting without guilt. These things looked small from outside, but inside me, they were building something strong. One night, I wrote a list, not goals, not dreams, just truths. I wrote, I am not late. I am not weak. I am learning. I read the list again and again. It didn't make me confident. It made me calm. Sometimes I still felt lost, but now I understood something important. Feeling lost does not mean you are going the wrong way. Sometimes it means you are between old and new. I stopped comparing my life to others, or at least I tried. When comparison came, I reminded myself that everyone is fighting a battle we can't see. Everyone is carrying something heavy. One evening, before sleep, I asked myself another honest question. If my life never becomes perfect, can I still live it fully? The answer came quietly. Yes. Because life is not a movie, there is no final scene where everything makes sense. There is only now, and now, and now again. I stopped chasing a future version of myself. I started taking care of the present one. On the last day of this chapter, I stood near the window again. Same room, same walls, but I felt different. Not because I became someone else, but because I accepted who I was becoming. I thought about anyone who might be listening to this story, someone tired, someone lost, someone waiting for a sign, and if I could say only one thing, it would be this. You don't need to change your whole life today. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to stay. Stay honest, stay present, stay alive inside your own story. Because one ordinary day without warning, you will look back and realize something important. You didn't escape your life, you lived it, and that is enough.